Republic of China.
Good to meet you.
Great pleasure to see you again.
Good to see you again.
Me too.
And we're going to have a very successful meeting, I have no doubt.
我肯定我们今天会有非常成功的会议。
But he's a very tough negotiator. That's not good.
但是他是很强硬的谈判者哦，这不好。
We know each other well. Well, thank you very much. It's a great honor to be with a friend of mine, really for a long time now, if you think about it. The very, very distinguished and respected President of China. And we will be having some discussions. I think we've already agreed to a lot of things, and we'll agree to some more right now. But President Xi is a great leader of a great country, and I think we're going to have a fantastic relationship for a long period of time. And it's an honor to have you with us. Thank you very much. Thank you.
President Trump, it is a great pleasure for me as well to meet you. And it feels very warm seeing you again because it's been many years. Since your re-election, we have spoken on the phone 3 times, exchanged several letters, and stayed in close contact. And our joint guidance, China's relations have remained stable on the whole. Given our different national conditions, we do not always see eye to eye with each other. And it is normal for the 2 leading economies of the world to have frictions now and then. And in the face of winds, waves, and challenges, you and I, at the helm of China-US relations, should stay the right course and ensure the steady sailing forward of the giant ship of China-US relations. I always believe that China's development goes hand in hand with your vision to make America great again. Our 2 countries are fully able to help each other succeed and prosper together.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to Syriana Analysis. I'm your host, Almassian. Thank you very much for tuning in to the 30th episode of Cold War 2.0 with our dear friend, Tarik, Cyril, Amar. How are you doing, Tarik?
I'm fine. How are you, Kevork?
I'm good. Thank you so much, guys, for tuning in, and a special thanks to our dear friend Red Access for moderating the live chat. He is back. So guess who's back? And guys, happy Halloween for those who are celebrating. I don't know what's the meaning behind Halloween. I just know people dress up things in the streets. And if you're celebrating, happy Halloween to you. And this software is reminding us that it is Halloween. So the background today is all about Halloween again. But let's move to South Korea, where the meeting happened between Xi and Donald Trump. From the statements of both leaders, it was quite obvious that they would like to get along and they would like to strike a deal. I think, Tarik, if I want to start this conversation with you, I would like to mention that this recent Trump-Xi Jinping meeting, according to several American outlets, reportedly paused Chinese rare earth export controls and led to a tariff reduction. Yet many of the structural issues, such as technological dependence and supply chain vulnerability, remain unaddressed between the both leaders. Given this, Tarik, is this agreement a strategic reset by the US or simply a tactical pause that allows China to consolidate its advantage while the underlying balance of power shifts irreversibly?
Well, yeah, that's a key question. My sense is that the outcome of this particular meeting isn't strategic. It's not strategic for either of the 2 sides because the outcome is too modest. It's far too modest. I think if you look at various Western commentators, and in this case, I happen to sort of agree with them, you get sort of the same assessment from Bloomberg to The Economist via the Financial Times, the Wall Street Journal. They're all saying, in essence, the same thing, which is that this is a modest agreement, that it's, I would call it much more on the tactical than the strategic level, that it's temporary, explicitly so, but also implicitly so. A lot of the agreements, all of the agreements, are meant to be renegotiated in a year, maybe prolonged, maybe not. But then you have to add the fact that, of course, a lot of things can happen within a year, especially if you have somebody like Trump in the mix who never feels bound by anything, right? He has said yesterday. So it's not a strategic event. It's not that sort of level, but it's extremely interesting in other respects. The other big message you get from reading all these Western outlets, right? These Western, not Chinese outlets, is that the Chinese have come out on top. A lot of them don't put it quite as brutally because they're Western outlets, but they can't avoid it. If you read it carefully, that's what they're saying. The Chinese have come out on top. And there are various reasons, and we can talk about why, but I would sum it up like this for now. I don't want to talk too long before you can ask another question or give your own comments and assessment. I would sum it up now. It's a tactical, defensive, but clear victory for China. It's a tactical and defensive, but clear victory for China, not for the US.
Tarik, since you mentioned the mainstream press, I have read this article. I will just screen the article here by CNBC. And just a second. So when I read this article on CNBC, they noted that China gained leverage in the trade war, not primarily by matching tariffs, but by reshaping the rules of global supply chains and rare earths dependency. So does the US still possess the strategic tools to regain control over these critical supply chain choke points, or has China already moved from defense to dominance in the tech economic arena, like implying a deeper shift in global power than most analysts realize?
I personally wouldn't call what China now has dominance. Dominance is what the Americans dream of having and what they've just lost. Or not just, it's been a process. But the Americans definitely don't have dominance either. I think we are now in a situation where China is capable of defending itself very effectively. And the reason for that is that it can go on the offensive if it has to. In other words, China now can inflict very serious pain on the US. And the West more generally, if they have to, they can also hit the Dutch, the Nexperia case, they can hit the Europeans, again, the Nexperia case, but they can certainly massively hit the Americans as well. The hold they have on rare earths for now, and at least for the near future, is extremely tight. They have 7% of the mining in the world under their control in some way, and they have 90% of the processing of rare earth, right? And when you look at individual indicators, for instance, just today I was getting a figure, I think it was the Financial Times, for 98% of magnets containing rare earths, which are extremely important in industry nowadays, the European Union is dependent on China. 98%, right?
Wow.
So this is a long-term strategy. It's deliberate. This has not happened by chance. The Chinese have built this up over decades, actually. They have accelerated this and other strategies that are meant to establish, so to speak, trade deterrence against the US, most of all, since 2018. 2018 was a milestone. It's not that they hadn't done anything before. They're much smarter than that. They plan long term. But 2018 was an accelerating moment for China as well, because the US came out so brutally against them at the time. And, you really have to put this in a long-term context, what's going on here, because the Americans, of course, will not give you an honest account of how far they are retreating, right? They never do. They also don't give themselves an honest account, which is a much more problematic issue, right? But look at it. It's not long ago that you had smarty pants in Washington, and quite a few, who would openly say, we will wage so much tech and economic warfare de facto on China that China has to fundamentally change. We will get them to stop subsidizing their industries. We will get them to stop doing the 5-year plans the way they want to do them. Ultimately, we get to regime change. That was, of course, always behind this. All these things are off the table. This is not long ago. And the Chinese have already gotten the Americans to quietly, the Americans never admit their defeats, but quietly they've abandoned all of this. And what you're getting now is essentially America talking to the Chinese and saying, listen, how can we find a compromise? Yet it's hard for Europeans to understand how unusual this is, because Americans never seek a compromise. Americans always seek dominance. And the Chinese have forced them. They have compelled them to seek compromise. This is what's happening here. And that trend will continue. This is why Xi, when he said that, I had read this before about you and I have to stir, you, Donald Trump, and I, Xi Jinping, we have to steer the ship of our relationship through all sorts of storms and so on. What was he saying? He was saying, you and I are the same. We both are captains of this ship. You're not above me. We are both captains of the same ship. And you will not get this ship through the storm without me. And I admit it's going to be hard without you, but you need me. You need me. That's what he was saying. And there's one final consideration that people I don't think appreciate enough. The Americans are at a disadvantage for another reason, because if you look at it at this whole thing as a form of economic warfare, which it is, the American war aims are much more ambitious, or at least used to be much more ambitious than the Chinese. The Chinese have never set out to change America. Doesn't interest them. Doesn't interest them at all. Why would it, right? The Chinese don't have a program of trying to change the way the Americans organize their economy. The Chinese certainly don't have a program of trying to change how the Americans organize their politics. Just isn't there. The Chinese strategic program is essentially defensive. They don't want to be dominated. That's all they have to achieve, which also means that when the Chinese get to a point where the Americans have been compelled to live with them in a fair way, they can again do deals with them, because they don't need to change the Americans. The Americans had a far more ambitious aim, and of course it will reoccur. They don't learn this quickly. But the Americans have been hampered by their far too ambitious aim, which wasn't getting to equality with China. The American aim was the opposite, avoiding equality with China and dominating it, which is much, much harder. It's an offensive aim. And what we are seeing is that this American strategy clearly now has been defeated. This is not even the beginning of that defeat. We had signs of this in the last years, but this is a clear milestone, and this is how it will be remembered.
Do you think, Tarik, that when Xi mentioned and said during this meeting that our economic growth goes in parallel with your vision of America, make America great again, like it implicated, like there is like he's like telling him there is an opportunity, but this is also a threat. Like we should grow together. We grow together.
It's exactly that. I think you're absolutely right. It to me it means if you calm down, if you, Donald Trump, and you, the Americans, calm down finally and start behaving rationally and looking for compromise with us, we're ready to work with you. But if you don't calm down, and if you try to dominate us and to disrupt us politically and economically, then your program at home will also not work, because our economic response is going to be so strong that we will then really mess with your economy, and that will mess with your politics. That's very much what you were saying here. It's a peace offer, but it's a peace offer from an equal who is saying, if you don't treat me as an equal, you're in big trouble too.
Yes. Tarik, do you think that one of the reasons of this, let's say, Trump's attempt to get along with China, that he's also looking now, this is a theory that I'm reading, that China is holding its grip over many rare earth minerals, and the Americans cannot simply come and take over these rare earth minerals, but they can take over the Venezuelan rare earth minerals, right?
Yes.
And nowadays we have today a new article published in the American press by Antonio Maria Delgado. And what they're basically saying that the Trump administration is probably days, probably hours away from invading Venezuela. And in this case, if they take over, let's say, on Venezuelan rare earth minerals and fuel, oil, and all oil, it's the biggest oil reserve in the world. I think the US will have certain advantage over China, right?
I wouldn't put it like that. I would say they would consolidate themselves in the Western Hemisphere, which has always been a key part of American strategy, right? To exclude others from the Western Hemisphere, the old Monroe Doctrine, which has never really stopped functioning, and dominate the Western Hemisphere. That means de facto South America and, Canada, which doesn't really count because, I know it's not very nice, but Trump has a point when he treats the Canadians like they're already part of the USA. In a way they are, So they have all of these guys more or less under control, unfortunately, very unfortunately. If they invade Venezuela and finally impose a new government, which is, I think, what they want to do, that's going to be an advantage for them, but there are many other sources of oil in the world. It's not as if Venezuela doesn't have even if you control Venezuela, you don't control oil the way that the Chinese now control rare earths. Yes. It's not at all the same. They would control an even larger share of the global oil supplies in their favor. They would be interested, by the way, in selling it, partly at least. They would be interested in using it for their own economy as well. But, major producers in the Middle East, Russia, and so on, they wouldn't be affected by that. In fact, the effects on the oil price might, first of all, be that it goes up because of the instability. And let's not forget, there might be major resistance. Yes. It's possible that there isn't much. It's possible that, as the Americans often do, they strike with so much violence and brutality that their enemies very quickly have to give in, or their victims, I should really say. But it's also possible that they also get sucked into something that they can't control, as they were in Iraq, as they were in Afghanistan. It's not that simple after all. We will see. But no, it's not. Even that isn't a game changer in that way. It's not. Yeah. It's not. They can't make up for what they've... Look at it like this, When I found this thing that Xi said about make America great again. You're absolutely right about what you just pointed out. But I think there's something else that's very interesting here. And I don't think Xi meant to say this. This is me, right? But in a way, if you think about it, Xi is the one who has made China great again. He's already done it. And that is what Trump has encountered. The China that he expected and that Scott Bessent expected. I mean, go back and read up how Scott Bessent was talking about China. The arrogance was through the roof and it was genuine. And all of these bullies, the Chinese have taught them a lesson in the last years. They've taught them you don't get your way anymore like this. And they had to swallow that. So it's not only Xi. It goes back to Deng Xiaoping. You can even say it goes back to the revolution, right? Yeah. So the process of making China great again has been on its way for a long time. But definitely Xi is a major figure in that. When Trump looks at Xi, he's looking at somebody who's done it. Yeah. Whereas Trump is trying. And he's not very good at it. And his political system is rotten. And he is tied to an insane partner in the Middle East called Israel, which messes with everything that the United States does, including its domestic politics. No, I'm sorry. If somebody was good at making the country great again, it's the Chinese. They did it. They made the country great again. That's their story, and it's true, right? Whereas Trump is just talking up until now. He's just talking.
Speaking of make America great again and China or Xi Jinping made China great again, we have an article published in the Guardian very recently.
The Guardian.
Britain would do well to remember where its power over China lies.
Power, yeah, right?
It is ridiculous for the government to splurge on defense while it slashes spending on its most valuable asset, culture. So the article argues that Britain should abandon its military ambitions in the face of China's rise and instead lean on cultural influence. Yet, if the UK is so if the UK is now just second division state, how exactly does dressing up soft power as defense strategy protect British interests when hard power is still what defines global competition?
I don't even know what this guy is taking. I mean, Simon Jenkins is insane. He's insane on almost any topic he speaks up about. Look up his stuff on Ukraine, on Russia. I mean, the man is a fantasist through and through. To me, he stands for the decline of the British elites. You know, he's just ridiculous as a figure. But look, let's take him by his word, culture, right? So he thinks there is power. He's literally using that term, power in British culture that they can somehow use with China. Like what? Read them Rudyard Kipling poems? The glory of colonialism? Or he thinks that, you know, they can stage Shakespeare a few times in Beijing and the Chinese are going to keel over and be like, oh my God, we've never seen anything so interesting. What the hell is he talking about? This is nonsense. This is complete bullshit. I'm sorry, right?
But it is coming in a major outlet in Britain.
It's the Guardian. I'm sorry, man. It's a hallucinogenic driven thing.
Where do the people go to educate themselves on politics? Don't they go to the Guardians, to the Independent?
No, unfortunately, the Guardian still has a lot of influence. I understand. So has the BBC, which is not much more useful nowadays. It used to be a good place, more or less. We can get into that another time. But look, I think this is just a cry of despair. You know what? Somebody who's honest in Britain and who analyzes the relationship between Chinese power and UK power would have to say the Chinese are a giant, which is just an objective fact. They're an economic and military giant. They're not in our neighborhood, and we are lucky because if they were in our neighborhood, they could exert real trouble. They're not in our neighborhood, but they are like 100 times our size. Like 100 times our size. And they are growing and we are declining. We are not doing well, right? So the trajectories aren't cool either. No. So what you would have to say if you were British and rational is, how do we thrive in such a world? And there are ways to do that, right? You would build a decent economic relationship. You would leverage the military power you have left, including a very small nuclear deterrent, which the Brits still have, unfortunately. I don't think it's in safe hands anymore. But you would leverage all this to sort of secure yourself, but that's all you can do. If you have any dreams of like, oh, we're going to sort of have a say over what happens in Taiwan, just forget it, right? I mean, those days are over. And you know, ideas that you can flee from that into the refuge of soft power, whatever this guy means by culture, like modern British cinema. What are they talking about?
Who watches British cinema?
Look, if he means like old culture, like old ancient high culture, the Chinese beat the Brits like hands down. I'm sorry, but the Chinese had a high culture when the Brits were jumping through the fucking trees. I'm sorry, but this is true, right? The ancestors. It's just a fact. And so this doesn't work. If he talks about modern culture, right? Distinctly modern contemporary culture, I'm sorry, but you know what? The Chinese have their own novelists, they have their own sculptures, they have their own sculptors, they have their own architects. They don't need Britain. Believe me, they don't. It's okay. And the famous British fashion sense, I think that's also not required in Beijing. So I'm sorry, this is nonsense. This is complete nonsense. It's a sign of post-imperial despair. And let me add one more thing. I love it when this happens with the British. And the British are very, very intense about this. Because everybody always looks at Russia and goes, whatever Russia does, oh, it's because they're still thinking in terms of their old empire and they can't come to grips with the fact that the empire is gone. Yeah, look at Britain. Look at Britain. All of Britain is about not coming to grips with the fact that the empire is gone.
And nowadays, they're also legal system, it seems, and the police have been captured by the Zionist lobby. Like they're coming after health doctors, like nurses, doctors in the hospital, arresting them from their homes for opposing Israeli onslaught against the Palestinians in Gaza. It's crazy, like what they're doing over there in London.
Fundamentally, right? I mean, to be serious. In Europe, after World War II, I think you could argue you had, Eastern Europe was different anyhow, but in Western Europe, after World War II, during the Cold War, you could argue you had two states, only two, not more, that were sometimes trying in a sometimes significant way to have some sovereignty, not complete, nobody did. And that's France and Britain. And France was the clearer case. At times, by no means always, don't get me wrong here, right?
Yes.
Everybody else had completely limited sovereignty anyhow. But even those two, right? Nobody was ever fully sovereign in Cold War Western Europe. Absolutely not. They were all clients one way or the other, right? And now you have this perverse situation that all these European states are even more dependent on the US, while the US has become more brutal and more exploitative. And the UK, which made a huge fuss about leaving the European Union, right, as if that made a difference, is as non-sovereign as the Germans, as the French, as the Dutch, as the Italians, as all of us in Europe. Toward the US, we all don't have sovereignty anymore. We are not real sovereign states. That's just a fact. That's a technical fact.
Yeah. Unfortunately. Sevak, thank you so much, Habibi. He says, episode 30 of Cold War 2.0. It's great to have you both in this crazy world. We definitely need more alternative media like yours. And we really love doing this, to be honest with you also. And we love hearing the insights of Tarik. We do this every Friday, guys, at 5 p.m. Central European time. This week it's still 12 noon time in Eastern American time because you haven't guys changed the time zone yet. But I think starting next week it will go back again, and you will the time will be 11 a.m. Eastern American time. Let me just check the comments because we're going to move to something important. What is Russia's? How was it? Burevestnik, you said. Burevestnik missile. So this week, Russia said that they have successfully managed to test this missile system. And it is claimed that to have a practically unlimited range, able to evade missile defense systems and loiter for hours. I think if I want to ask you from a strategic deterrence perspective, Tarik, does the introduction of this type of weapon signal a fundamental shift from deterrence by destruction to deterrence through uncertainty? And if so, how should NATO and the United States adapt their nuclear postures to this new logic of Russia?
You know, I mean, in a way, it's tricky with deterrence, right? You can read nuclear deterrence in two ways. You can say, on one side, it's about the certainty of destruction, right? This was the famous, if there even was an acronym like that in the Cold War, MAD, the famous MAD, mutually assured destruction. So there the idea, assured means certain. There the idea was that I have enough nuclear weapons so that even if you strike first, I will always have enough to take you with me. Take you with me, right? So, and then of course, but nuclear deterrence also always had an uncertainty factor built into it, right? Even beginning with the question that, is the other one really going to strike back? Because you can imagine scenarios in which somebody opens a nuclear war and damages the opponent so terribly that they have to that they actually agree to stop and lose the war, right?
Yeah.
So there's been this weird interplay of certainty and uncertainty. So that's a very difficult question to answer. But let's start maybe with something simpler. I think one thing that Burevestnik is aiming at, and the Russians announced that they were working on this 7 years ago, 2018. This also goes back to 2018, when Putin explicitly, publicly announced a whole set of new weapons, of which Burevestnik was one. And I think one reason why it's coming up now again and so prominently is they might just be ready. That's one thing, of course. But the other thing, politically speaking, might be that Trump has been going on so much about new ballistic missile defense, what he calls the Golden Dome, right? Because with Trump, everything has to be golden, right? The Golden Dome. And there is certainly a message here that they're sending to the Americans, which is, you think you can shoot down our ballistic missiles? Yeah, but our ballistic missiles aren't the thing that's going to hit you in the end. Right? So that's very important. And the other thing, of course, is that the Russians say, Putin says this himself, that the West, no Western nation, no Western military, including the United States, of course, can stop this weapon, which is actually very interesting because it's a subsonic missile. A lot of people don't pay attention to this. As missiles go nowadays, it's slow. It's subsonic. It's not a fast missile, not by missile standards. So the Russians have done two things over recent years. They have made fast advances and outpaced the Americans in hypersonic missiles. So where the whole idea is they have to be even faster than missiles ever used to be. They're already using those in Ukraine. And now they're adding a totally new concept, which is this one isn't very fast, but it can loiter and it's extremely maneuverable, right? It's like playing with a toy car, you know? It can sort of go around any corner it wants to go around and stay in the air forever because, we should perhaps add this, because it is its propulsion system isn't driven by ordinary rocket fuel, either solid or liquid. It is driven by a small nuclear reactor. And what the Russians have told us about this is what Putin says, it's a reactor that produces about as much energy as the nuclear reactors on our submarines. Right? That's a common technology. The Russians have those, and the Americans have those. I don't know who else has nuclear-driven submarines, but submarines that rely on a nuclear reactor to drive them, right? Not diesel, which also still exists. So what they're saying is they have miniaturized a reactor that usually takes up a big compartment of a submarine to fit into a missile. That's what they're saying. And they have a reactor now that has about the same power output, but fits in a missile. When you read what Western experts say about this, I was reading an article in Scientific American about this thing. They're basically all saying that's the real achievement. That's the real thing that we didn't think they could do. And it seems, I think they've done it. I don't think they're lying. I think they've actually cracked that. They've cracked that problem. So that also gives them the opportunity to use this miniaturized nuclear reactor technology for other systems, civilian, by the way, as well, but also potentially other weapon systems. So there is a whole set of being ahead advances here that the Russians are displaying to their main competitors, and in this case, I think mostly, of course, to the United States. They are also bringing online a new ballistic missile soon, the Sarmat, which will replace what they have now. So they're modernizing the whole arsenal. And right now, they're ahead of the Americans. Now, this can change. This can change. It's an endless race, right? The Americans might catch up again, overtake, who knows? But right now, the Russians are ahead of the Americans.
When I learn about the characteristics of these weapons, I ask myself probably a naive question, and that is, do we really need these weapons? Like,
no,
why are these nations building these weapons? It's like they're doomsday weapons.
Because we are a failed species. Everybody talks about failed state, but we are a failed species. I'm sorry. I mean, look, I hope we still have a chance, and we will sort of survive long enough as humanity to actually become better. But the way we are now, it's not going to work out. I'm sorry. We're going to kill each other sooner or later because we are not making enough intellectual progress, right? Or ethical progress, whatever you want to call it. It's a classical problem. We're good at technological progress, but we are not good enough at political, ethical, intellectual progress, and we cannot regulate our relationships on this ever smaller planet well enough. I mean, I don't want to go into recondite theories, but a lot of people are probably familiar with Fermi's paradox, right? The famous moment where Fermi looked up at the sky, essentially, right? There are different versions of this, and he said, "Where is everybody?" And what he meant by this is the universe was so big, and they knew already at the time, that actually we should be surrounded by extraterrestrial intelligence life. It should be everywhere. There's so many planets. Where is everybody, right? The strange thing is not if aliens are there. The strange thing is that we don't see any. That's what he was saying. And his answer to this Fermi paradox was to say, well, it must be because most intelligent life fails sooner or later. They must hit some sort of bottleneck. And I have to say, I think we are in a bottleneck like this. We are in this place where we survived the first Cold War by divine intervention, not because we are smart, because we were lucky again and again and again. And now we're going for another one, which is even worse. And at some point, you wonder how long we can tempt fate before something goes really very, very badly wrong, in the sense of either disrupting our development for thousands of years, maybe they're survivors, but they'll be back to the caves, right? Or of actually destroying us and destroying our biosphere so thoroughly that there won't be survivors, at least not among us, maybe among the insects, who knows, right? Wow. But seriously, these weapons are horrific. And Burevestnik, of course, is not even the worst. Burevestnik is the worst. I'm sure you're going to ask about the other ones.
Even worse now, worse ones. And those are the declared ones. Those are the tested ones. Imagine the secret ones now. I don't want to think much about it because when I think about it, it reminds me of the conspiracy theorists who say this is the cycle of humanity. Every time we reach peak technology, we kill ourselves and we blow up everyone, and then we restart again. So they say this is not the first time humanity has killed itself. And
listen, didn't you see Battlestar Galactica 2, the second version? You need silence for that. You need artificial intelligence, and then that cycle starts. We're close. We're close.
We're very close. We're very close. By the way, you mentioned Western analysts. And I also read some of the Western analysts being skeptical due to Burevestnik's test record and radiation risks. One of the articles pointed out that Russia may be using this as a psychological and signaling tool just as much as a weapon.
Yes, I agree in the sense that it's definitely meant to be signal. And that's actually what states do, right? If somebody wants to depict this as something uniquely Russian, that's nonsense. That's what states do. They signal that way, right? It's rude, but it's true. But if that person means the weapon isn't real, it's a trick, I don't believe that. And I tell you why. Because the Russians wouldn't run the risk of the trick being shown up. I think they actually have this. They may not yet be able to produce large numbers of it. Maybe they're still at an early stage, but I think they have it. I think it has actually flown. And there are people who are now looking, because it's driven by a nuclear reactor, a small nuclear reactor, right, instead of fuel. The nuclear reactor essentially helps to heat the air in the jet propulsion system. That's basically speaking what's happening here, right? Which has all sorts of complications that the Russians apparently have solved, which have to do with cooling the reactor and whatever. And one thing you can cool is you can basically make the reactor open to the outside, right? You can use air. But when you do that, the weapon would then produce a heavy trace of contamination. Right? It would be very dirty while flying around. So there are some people who are now looking for traces of that in the atmosphere, trying to see if by that way they can prove that the Russians have actually let this thing fly for as long as they claim. But there are other people who rightly say it's not the only way to do this. It is. There are potential designs where the system is closed. and where the weapon wouldn't leave this trace, right? And they may have mastered that. So this is very difficult to assess. But politically speaking, my guess is if it wasn't working, they wouldn't have said it. I think this is a very serious issue. It may be the first one that flies, actually. It's known that they had a problem with this type of system, and there was an explosion several years ago, killing several people in a test area. But that's how Musk operates. His stuff explodes, right? And after a while, it flies. So that doesn't tell us anything. The Russians have gone probably through the same sort of development now, and they've made it.
Yeah. Before we move to the last part, Tarik, since our background is about Halloween, our moderator says the Halloween does have roots in harvest traditions. It originated from the Celtic festival of Samhain, which marked the end of the harvest season and the beginning of winter. Yeah, that makes really sense, actually, that we are now in the winter season finally. Final part, Tarik. Russia advances in eastern Ukraine to encircle the strategic city of Pokrovsk. And this is an article today in Spanish press. They say Zelensky denies that his military outnumbered 8-1. He's surrounded, but pessimism is growing in Kiev in the face of the invading army's offensive. Then Zelensky himself made some statements. I just want to show you these statements in this case. He says, to summarize today's Zelensky's briefing, the situation in Pokrovsk is fully under control. The Russians aren't getting anywhere. Putin really wants to visit Pokrovsk, but he would be killed if he did. Russia has lost the battle for Kupiansk. Ukrainian intelligence destroyed an Oreshnik in the summer of 2023 at the Kapustin Yar rocket launch complex. Russia is running out of resources to produce missiles, bombs, and drones. Those are the statements of Zelensky. If we want to speak about facts, what is happening in Pokrovsk at the current moment?
Yeah. Let me add one thing, because I should have said it when we were talking about Burevestnik. It's not just Burevestnik in terms of new version systems being tested. It's also Poseidon, which is essentially a very large underwater drone. It's shaped like a torpedo, but it's much, much bigger than you usually imagine a torpedo. And Poseidon, in a way, is even more dangerous for the United States, because it's clearly meant to probably travel through the Pacific and attack the West Coast in case of war. And it apparently can carry a warhead of, I think, up to 10 megatons, which is humongous. It's sort of one of those weapons, when equipped with such a warhead, that destroys not a city, but like a chunk of a large country. Or if it's a small country, it destroys the whole country. That's the sort of weapon. It can create a tsunami. It can take out whole fleets at once. It's and again, it's unstoppable.
It's massive.
It's similar to Burevestnik in that it cannot be caught and stopped by what the West has in terms of defense right now. Anyhow, let's go back to Pokrovsk, which is also known as Krasnoarmeysk. It's the same place, if people hear that, right? And then there's Kupiansk. Those are two different places. The Russian military has claimed for, I think it's about half a week now. I might be off by a day or two, right? But for a few days, the Russian military has claimed that it has encircled Ukrainian troops in these, at least in these two major locations. There are also smaller cases, but these are the two big ones. And that in each of them, there are about 4,000 to 5,000 to 6,000 that are inside a Russian encirclement, right?
Yes.
These encirclements are, when you look at them on a map, they don't look complete, but that isn't the point. That isn't the point, because as we know, as this war has taught, you know, people like us, an encirclement can be de facto complete when there is sufficient fire control, right? So in the sense of, you don't need to see a full circle on a map, but if the Russians in this case control enough of the roads around the place with fire control, then the place is cut off, right? It's encircled. How many troops the Russians have brought to these two places, I don't know. I don't know if they've given us figures. Ukrainians have given estimates. Some are, I think, from the West, and it's not the main thing. The main question is, what is actually happening in terms of the tactical situation, right? I personally tend to believe that the Russians are telling us the truth in this case as well, because it would be very stupid for them to pretend that they have full encirclements when that's not the case. Because look at it from a Russian perspective, they would know that within a certain time, the Ukrainians would break the non-existent encirclement, and that would then be a Ukrainian victory. Why would they create that scenario? That makes no sense. The other thing is that Putin himself has offered to both international journalists, but also Ukrainian journalists explicitly, that the Russian army would essentially give them free passage and safe passage through their lines into the encirclements.
Yes.
So that these journalists could then come and convince themselves of the situation on the ground, even talk to the encircled troops, literally, right? The Ukrainians, of course, have rejected this and have said, no way, any journalist who takes up this offer is in essence a traitor. There will be legal consequences and so on. To summarize, I think this is true. I think the encirclements are real. People may ask, how can Zelensky risk lying so bluntly, so brazenly, right? Doesn't Zelensky know that, and then the cities will fall, and then what you look like, right? He's done this many times. He's done this many, many times in the past. Zelensky, in Ukraine, there's a meme, there's almost a joke about Zelensky going to places that are about to fall and having his picture taken, right? It's literally a Ukrainian internet joke, right? That if Zelensky is somewhere having his picture taken, either real or against a green screen or something, and it says Pokrovsk, it means Pokrovsk is about to fall, right? It's really, that's a Ukrainian thing, not a Russian thing. Zelensky is in a situation where he's playing for time. He is on the verge, or he thinks he's on the verge. I don't know if he will succeed, but I think he thinks that he can still get enormous financial support out of the Europeans, not the Americans, out of the Europeans. And you can see how coordinated this is. The Economist now, lead article, long article, saying basically two things. It will be incredibly expensive, as if it hadn't been, right? It will be incredibly expensive, but it's worth it. It's worth it. Let's throw much more money at Ukraine. So there's a whole campaign now underway to secure hundreds of billions for the Zelensky regime, as I would call it. And Zelensky, of course, has to get this somehow done before these cities fall. And I think his hope is that even if the Russians have encircled them, which I think they have, that the process of fully taking them can be drawn out long enough so that he can negotiate these deals, and then they can fall. This sounds cynical, but consider that General Syrski, who is the commander-in-chief, the military head of the commander-in-chief, legally speaking, is Zelensky, but Syrski is the military commander-in-chief of the Ukrainian armed forces. Syrski has sent very clear signals already that he believes in basically standing to the death. He wants to turn these things into Stalingrad, right? But without a happy end for the defenders. So that they just have to hold out and keep the Russians at bay as long as they can. I think that's really the calculation here. We've had similar situations even in 2015 under Poroshenko. So Ukrainian leaderships sacrificing considerable number of troops in desperate, encircled situations, the Baltseve was very similar, Ilovaisk, is not uncommon. They do that when they think it's politically worth it. They do that.
Tarik, not everyone in the press nowadays is optimistic about Ukraine's chances. And this is an article published by Roger Boyes. He says, I hate to say it, but Kiev won't last till spring. For all the EU's rousing words, there just isn't the money or the will to keep defending Ukraine. This is from the Times, by the way. And it is surprising to see that some of these analysts are now jumping the wagon of warning the EU of the difficult situation in Ukraine. I still at the same time see the enthusiasm, like verbally you see the enthusiasm by the officials in the EU, but facts on the ground do not match the enthusiasm, right? And still EU officials, I know I keep repeating Kaja Kallas, but Kaja Kallas is the senior diplomat of the EU.
Yeah.
I mean, how can we not quote her when?
Yeah, no, she's unfortunately, she's important. It's insane,
She's unfortunately important, and we spoke about today China, we spoke about Russia, and this is I don't know if you watched this video I published yesterday on my X account. So Kaja Kallas, on one hand, she says Japanese experts say the war is unpopular in China. So she is referring to Japanese experts to talk about China.
Can you imagine that? I'm sorry, Kevork, but what sort of mind, in quotation marks, do you have to sit there and go, I've talked to a Japanese expert, and he told me, or she, what sort of logic is that? That's your intelligence gathering? That's how this works? I talked to, was it at a bar? Was it, I don't know, over dinner? Was it over lunch? What is going on here?
Exactly. It's like reading the Chinese communist newspaper to learn about Japan. It's the same. Like they're not going to be a very objective about their competitors. Anyways, she says Japanese experts say the war is unpopular in China, so Beijing must justify backing Russia by framing it as in their national interest. And then she also says if the Ukraine war ends, U.S. focus would shift to China. Like, then it is in the national interest of China, right?
She's had a thought. She's had a thought. Is that the first time in her life? Look, you and I and other people like us, that is people with brains, unlike Kallas. I'm sorry, I have to put it like this, and there are a few of us, right? It's not that hard. It's not that hard. We have said from the beginning of this crisis and this war in Ukraine, that the Americans, back then under Biden and with Blinken, turning to the Chinese and saying, help us stop the Russians, was of course absolutely insane. Because at the same time, the Americans were absolutely crystal clear, like, when we are done with the Russians, you, China, are next.
Yes.
So while we are still having trouble with the Russians, can you please help us take out your main ally so that we can then deal with you when you're alone? That's what they were saying.
But Tarik, it's worse. But it's worse. It's worse. I assure you, it's worse than that, because what Kaja Kallas said. Kaja Kallas doesn't even say that why is China helping Russia? We have nothing against China. No, she says we want to defeat China.
Yes, she's telling them.
And then she says, why is the Chinese helping the Russians?
I feel like people who still have ordinary, you don't have to be hyper smart. Some of them are very smart. But you only have to be normal intellectually. People with normal intellectual processes, when they look at people like Kallas and von der Leyen and Baerbock and Macron and Starmer and Merz, by the way, and Wadefuhl, the German, they must just be sitting there and you guys are all completely nuts. What do you even want from us?
Today, Wadefuhl was in Damascus, by the way, and
I know. I've seen it, yeah.
And he met with Jolani. And if I watch this video and I tortured myself, you should also.
It's not in their interest that this war stops, because then America's attention will turn to China, and it's not in their interest. It is interesting, why he said that. Later on, I spoke to some think tankers from Japan whose assessment was that actually the war in Ukraine is not very popular in China. So they need to also explain this to the people, why they are the key enablers of this war. So to make this softer and say, see, this is in our interest. It's not
even
in their
interest. Even he can't believe it. He's like, from Japan.
Oh man, she asked think tankers in Japan, Tarik. How dare you? Our friend says any podcast mentioning Kaya Kallas deserves full support for its comedic value. Thanks, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Really, take the red pill now for your generous support, and thank you so much, Zisis Karagianis, for your generous support, and thank you so much also, Sevak, for all your daily contribution and support also for Syriana analysis. And thank you so much, Red Access, for always moderating the live chat. And our biggest thank always goes to our dear friend Tarik, Cyril, Amar, for this amazing commentaries, analysis, insights about different complicated geopolitical, military, and diplomatic issues that we discuss every week on Friday at 5 p.m. Central European time, and starting next week, it will be 11 a.m. again in Eastern American time. This is a weekly show, guys. If you like this show that we do, the easy thing to do is just hit the like button, subscribe to Syriana Analysis, and if you like to do more and support the independent work I'm doing, you could also become a patron. The link is scrolling on the screen, patreon.com/Syriana Analysis. And if you don't like to use Patreon, there are different other means in the description below. Tarik, my dear friend, thank you so much really for coming again, like every week, to the show.
Thank you, Kevork. Thank you.
And a special thanks to you all, guys, for watching this, for those who watched on YouTube and on Rumble. And we will see you definitely next Friday with Tarik, and I will come back again to you on Monday. So peace be upon you, upon your families. Peace. Salam.
Bye-bye.